from Christianity include the sacraments, baptism, receiving the Holy Ghost, confession, etc. If the social element is missing, then I think what is left is superstition. The social element is what makes a superstition into a religion. These days we often hear people say that they are spiritual but not religious. No doubt this can mean almost anything, but I think it gets at something, whatever it is, that is important to people who are not practicing religion. And it tends to be more private than social. Things like getting in contact with nature. I'm all for that, by the way, and to the extent that I am religious, that's the category I'm in. Sometimes, though, this spirituality is otherworldly, contact with spirits from the other side, or the netherworld, things like that. I don't go for that. I would call that superstition. My spirituality, such as it is this world, not other worlds. I don't believe in future or past lives or in divine reward or retribution. And I am an atheist in the plain sense that my belief system has no room for supernatural beings or forces. Okay, if that isn't controversial, then here's the more controversial part of my talk. There's a way in which atheism can be a lot like religion. That happens when atheists begin to evangelize. When atheists flout religion, when they are rude and obnoxious and pretentious and smug. When they belittle others for their beliefs. When they become uptight over trivialities like highway crossings, etc. When they make their atheism a moral crusade and make themselves into moral busybodies. Then they do atheism and other atheists a lot of harm.
Okay, so let's see, what is today? Looks like it's the 5th. February 5th, 2013. And this is a add-on commentary to a brief video that I started at an atheist meeting that we attended over the weekend. Anyway, there was this guy there giving a talk about whether atheism is a religion or not. And then the man purposefully decided to introduce some controversial aspects to his talk. And so he started out his talk by basically, well, to put it nicely, saying things that would offend probably most of the people there. So as a result, I tuned out probably the next 30 minutes of the talk because it was just kind of more boring stuff. But anyway, the first part of the talk, it was interesting in the fact that it was definitely stuff that I disagreed with. But only from that perspective. And so here's what the guy basically said. He said that when atheism is like a religion in a bad way, when atheists try to quote-unquote moralize or to be evangelical. And so anyway, I listened to the guy's talk, and then after the talk was over, some people asked questions, and I asked a question. I told the guy, well, I'd like to respond to the parts of your talk that were a bit more controversial. And I told the guy that a disparaging comparison between evangelical atheism and evangelical Christianity is essentially obtuse, non sequitur, and let's see. Okay, I remember the list now. So it was obtuse, non sequitur, and reprehensible. during the talk, the man said that the only reason, possible justification for an atheist actually responding to a religionist is if there were some provocation. And so the guy said he was an atheist, and that's fine. But I've encountered this argument before, and it's kind of a tired argument, really. I mean, so for example, the guy says that we should only respond as atheists to religionists if there's been a provocation. And there's all sorts of provocations. For example, with the case of the Mormon Church, we have over 30,000 or 30 or 40,000 missionaries going out every day to try to convert people to Mormonism. And then in Mormonism, we have children and adults being interrogated about their sexuality, about masturbate. Are they masturbating? Are they necking? Are they petting? Are they having sex outside of marriage? And even back in 1982, there was a letter from Spencer Kimball, a past Mormon prophet, telling all the Mormon congregations that oral sex was something that was bad. And then also Spencer Kimball came out with this book called Miracle of Forgiveness, which has been translated into 6 or 7 languages or so. And they're available at the Mormon Church distribution centers, which are kind of like little stores for Mormons to go buy their stuff. Anyway, this book, which is essentially a hate-filled book, page after page of hatred of the human condition, hatred that humans are sexual animals, and basically a denial of human nature. And anyway, a very damaging book, especially when it's required reading for Mormon children and adults. Essentially required reading. And so is that a provocation? I think so. And then they have the conferences every 6 months where they, have to do belief maintenance with their members, and where they rail against the evils of the world, and the only way to be happy is to be a Mormon. And to kiss the bum of the Mormon God. That's the only way you can be happy, my friend. And if you say we're wrong, then you're evil and of Satan. So that's a provocation that atheists have a right to respond to. Okay? And, with regard to the Mormon Church, in Utah, there's a very high rate of antidepressant use because it drives people here, especially women, crazy because it makes them think they have to be perfect, and they can't be perfect. And anyway, there's a whole cycle of stuff. Especially with the young boys with regard to masturbation, having to confess for something that's normal and natural. And then with the girls are brought in a little bit more when it comes to dating years. Necking, petting, fooling around a little bit of, a little bit of something in the back seat, a little bit, checking things out. You got to confess for that to your Mormon bishop too, little girl. And so they get us all from both sides eventually. And then coffee and tea. You can't go to the Mormon temple if you drink tea. What a trivial and absurd thing to be concerned about, whether someone's drinking tea or coffee. My hell, is that a sin? Who says? Now let's see. Let's think about the guy who says it's a sin. Kind of two guys. First guy was the guy who had sex with a 14-year-old and with the wives of other men, and then the second guy, sex with a 15-year-old and with the wives of other men. These are the guys who you're going to use as your moral guidance, huh? And so the guy in this talk, he criticizes atheists for essentially making any moral claims whatsoever. And why? What the fuck? We leave a religion and we don't get to say what's moral? I don't think so. Morality is a natural phenomenon. Morality is built into people. It's a combination of genetics and socialization. End of story. You don't need to worship a fucking God to be moral. And we get to say that. Okay? Why do we get to say it? Because you're still fucking people up with your fucking religion. What about in the Catholic Church, where they're raping children en masse? What about in the Islamic religion, where they force women to wear veils and cloth bags, and where they brainwash them into thinking that that's a good thing? And where the men think, the men are afraid to have their wives go out in public because they think, can't handle if another man looks at my woman. Scary. What if another man looks at my woman and thinks she's cute? Oh my goodness, I can't handle that. That's what happens in Islamic countries that have forced veiling, okay? So it's not just about modesty and choice and, some sort of purity. It's not what they say in the West, those stupid Western women who want to veil themselves. It's not purity against the vagaries of the patriarchy. No, it's not that, my friend. It's human spirit-destroying abusiveness. Fear of sexuality being foisted upon and put upon a whole society, and it drives everyone crazy. Now, admittedly, there's more than one type of Islam. For example, in Sunni Islam, they don't get temporary marriages. In Shia Islam, they do. And so in Sunni Islam, there's a lot more suicide bombers because they're a lot more restrictive than in Shia Islam. Because in Sunni Islam, you can't fucking go on a date, can't hold a woman's hand, can't do anything. So no wonder you want to get 72 virgins in the afterlife, or 72 raisins. I guess virgins. Maybe it'll end up being raisins for the guys who think it's virgins. So there's that. And then lastly I mentioned how there's been a debate between a guy named Scott Atran and Sam Harris, and how Scott Atran said that basically the Islamic terrorists don't really believe the mystical stuff that we claim that they do, and Sam Harris responded they do believe. The 9/11 people did believe, in the stuff, the 72 virgins, and stuff like that. So I'll provide links to some relevant videos and whatnot in connection with this video and my related blog post. So, yeah. So just because we left a religion doesn't mean we don't get to say what's right and wrong. Okay? There's just another comparison. There's plenty of people in less religious countries like China that are very moral and family-oriented, and they're not kissing the ass of the Islamic God or the Christian God, and yet they're very moral people, all right, on a family level. Now, that doesn't mean that the leaders don't have problems, but on a family level, they're very moral people, okay? So, as are most people. Majority of people are moral because morals are built in, and being an atheist doesn't make me ineligible to comment on morality. Okay, so it's February 6th, and 2013, and I decided to make an additional addendum to the video that I made yesterday. And so, anyway, I may have mentioned this yesterday, but after the talk, after the man spoke, the atheist brunch thing there, or toward the end of his talk, he was talking about strategy and whatnot, about how he was mainly concerned about strategy, because he's answering people's questions and stuff. And so Back in 1999, I protested in front of the Mormon Temple Square, and I showed up as an alien from Kolob. I've mentioned this before, but in case you haven't heard this in a different video, I showed up as an alien from Kolob, the Mormon homeworld, to state that the alien who came to Joseph Smith was essentially breaking a Kolobite rule of non-interference. And at the time, a number of people in the ex-Mormon community, not a number, but some people supported what I did, and some people said, don't offend people, and if we offend people, anyway, it's basically the same line of what we hear today. If you offend people, then they will never believe your opinion. And there's kind of two responses to that. And this is from someone who was easily offended himself when he was a strong believing Mormon. A little example of that is, perhaps you're familiar with the British comedy, Are You Being Served? Anyway, in that show, there's a lot of double entendres and sexual references and so on. And so when I was a strong believing Mormon, I saw that show and I wrote a letter to the public TV station that was showing it, saying, this is a bad program and please remove it. And then, after I left Mormonism, it's now one of my favorite programs. It's an excellent program, very funny, well written, and well structured, and anyway, a great program. So that's one example of how people can change their view. But another is, don't sell people short who are trapped in a cult. They still have brains, and even though they might object now, the things you're telling them may well have a cumulative effect. Okay? And also, when they finally were able to extract themselves from the cult, whatever cult they're in, or religion, the things you told them that were initially so offensive to them, those things will help them. So, I think it's better to be honest and tell the truth about what you really think. Like if you're a scientist, or even if you're an anthropologist, that's another thing that we talked about in the meeting afterward, and that is that there's people who they examine how tribes, have their own myths, and the speaker guy kind of alluded to the fact that basically everyone else gets to have morals, but maybe atheists don't. Anyway, that's absurd. Anyway, but basically the common anthropologist view of tribes and stuff is to think, it'd be inappropriate for us to say to these people, whoever they are, that their beliefs are wrong. Who are we to say that their beliefs are wrong? And Sam Harris has talked about this, how he had a conversation with this lady who was on a bioethicist panel for the president, and this lady was very concerned about, interrogation methods for 9/11 type hijackers and stuff, those type of Islamists, and she's very concerned about interrogation methods for them. But if she told Sam Harris reportedly that if a tribe thinks that removing the eye of the third child is a good thing, then of a child, who are we to question that? And that's basically an example of the moral vacuousness that's present in the ivory tower. Cultural relativism and moral relativism. And just because you become an atheist doesn't automatically make you a moral and cultural relativist. And I'd be the first person to say that Ayn Rand was an idiot, an amoral idiot who didn't understand one thing about what human nature actually is, and that being kind to people is a natural built-in thing that people get joy from doing. And no, it's not a stupid, evil thing to want to help people. Okay? So, so I think that as far as tribes go, that it would be cool to, encourage them to continue with their art and whatnot, and to have a symbolic view maybe of whatever their myths are, but not to take things literally. And so we should teach these people that science is real, and the people walked on the moon, and that, the history of science and religion shows that science has been triumphant as far as a method of separating fact from fiction, and that there aren't so many different ways of knowing that science is excluded from touching upon all aspects of existence. There's no such thing as non-overlapping magisteria, especially when it comes to science. I mean, in the past, the magisteria was basically mandated through on pain of death, and it still is in some Islamic countries. The magisteria stuff, the mystical stuff, was was basically mandated as fact. And so, you can go on to my blog and find a link to what Galileo's sentence was from the cardinals who were on the inquisitional panel. And that reminds me of another thing that I found, was reminded of yesterday on the BBC's website, and that was the presence of these Magdalene asylums in Ireland and some other countries, where they locked up women if they were too pretty or if they had sex outside of marriage. So that's the Catholic Church, okay, for you. And so that's another provocation, right? And people say, hey, they get their morals from religion, but what kind of morals would lock up a woman because she's too pretty, or lock her up because she has sex outside of marriage? Now, admittedly, in Islam, they want to do that. They want to lock women up who are too pretty, lock them up with a cloth, a very dark cloth. That's a form of locking up. And they want to lock women up and stone them if they have sex outside of marriage, okay? So there still is some inquisitional activity going on within the greater religious realm. Admittedly, the Catholic Church has had its wings cut as far as swooping down on people, but the Islamic religion is still doing it in full force in some places. So that's that. So anyway, That's my further commentary on all that stuff. So, okay, have fun.